Len Rust, thank you very much for joining the interview program. Len, let's start off with how you entered the IT sector.
Well, I've always been interested in electronics. I lived in London during the war. After the war, I joined the Sea Scouts. My father wanted me to go to sea.
Right.
And I then got into underwater detection, excuse me, radar, and all sorts of things like that, which was a great time to be able to move into automation and where things were going.
What year was that?
Oh my gosh, I was 15, 16, 17.
Right. Yeah. So for the record, that would have been 75 years ago. So
yeah.
You turned 90 last year, didn't you?
No, this year.
This year. My apologies.
It's coming up.
Yeah, right.
But I've been in the industry for
yep.
60 years. But
yep.
I moved through a lot of other areas before I got into the computer industry. And one of the things that happened was that I got fed up with living in the UK, having been at sea for 6-7 years. We went back to the UK, and with a school friend we decided we were going to emigrate to New Zealand.
Right.
Couldn't get into Australia.
Oh, right.
Went into New Zealand and worked on automatic telephone exchanges for 3 years.
Okay.
Contract. Finished that all up, went back to England at the end of the contract, and then came back out here again and walked down York Street, knocking on the door of Burroughs, NCR, IBM.
Right.
And ended up right up the other end at 103 York, talking to GE.
Right.
Went in there, General Electric, a fellow by the name of Dave McNabb said, "I'm looking for a writer."
Yep.
I wasn't a writer really, but I joined, and I did various jobs within the range of GE. That was 6 years or so.
Yep.
I was the bureau manager. I ended up with time sharing coming in, which, if one looks back, it's a form of the internet in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And so therefore we set up that. We worked on the Opera House.
Yep.
Doing all the construction and degrees of whatever they were looking at. We also did the Hobart race. First time that had ever been plotted. Unfortunately, we had yachts in the middle of snowy mountains, but we got it right.
Yep.
And it was something that we inherited over racing in the UK that was around the Isle of Wight.
Right.
So that was with GE time sharing. And then there was a group of us, VHP and so forth, decided to set up a computer service utility. So we set up CompuNet.
Right.
CompuNet ran on UNIVAC gear. And that was an interesting time around then as to who was about with PCs just starting to grow, people using open systems and everything else.
Yeah.
The market was changing quite a lot. And there were a few bureaus around still, like in York Street here, and you'd walk into the bureau and you'd get your cards punched, process your data, and away you go. So we moved on from that. With CompuNet, it was more about a utility service,
right,
where we were working with the mining industry right around Australia, out of Darwin, out of Perth, and whereby the analysts would come in from there gathering data in the marketplace. We still had to punch up cards though,
right.
Feed it into the computer, give a good turnaround, and processing, and off they go. A lot of that happened. Poseidon and those sort of companies sort of came up on the radar, and it was good company, and a lot of us invested in them and so forth. We then moved from that to the fact that CompuNet was worldwide, but in a lot of ways we were running out of money.
Right.
So Sims Metal came in and invested in us.
Yeah.
And we went on from there. I was on the board, and there were some very interesting people there that had come from all different walks of life.
Yep.
And we then moved on to be taken over by computer sciences.
Yep.
And that didn't work out for me. And I was only there for a year or so.
Right.
And then I moved on. Then I suddenly thought, we don't know much about this marketplace. We don't have enough data.
Yep.
We don't have enough analytics. We need to be able to see where does Australia position itself with this product or this service or this hardware, and where are we going in the world?
Yep.
So we ended up setting up IDC in Australia.
Right.
IDC was very interesting because a lot of people didn't like to share information.
Yep.
You had to find other ways of getting information from them. And of course in those stages it was mainframe, mini computers, and there were all sorts of different vendors.
Right.
And if you look at those vendors today, you wonder, where have they gone?
Yeah.
They've moved on, they've been taken over.
Yep.
Some have left Australia, some are still here.
Yep.
But the other thing that became very obvious then was about characters and personalities.
For sure.
And we had to look at who are the people out there that we respect, that are industry leaders. And if you looked at it, we knew all the senior executives of companies. If I ask you today, who is the head of this and that and everybody, we did this the other day at a meeting, nobody knows who the leaders are.
Yep.
So we need to think about leadership. We also had to get the message across to the government about what we were doing. I joined various associations, including the ACS. We used to have tremendous events up at Terrigal.
Right.
That was back in the 1970s. And they were brilliant, 200 to 300 people, and I still have the lists of the people that attended. If you look through those lists, 9 out of 10 of them were IT directors,
right,
or IT managers, whatever we called them in those days.
Yep.
So we went through all of that and said we need to get other associations. And working with the ACS, we decided that we needed to get the Software Association of Asia Pacific.
Right.
So the government supported us, gave us money to fly up to Taiwan.
Right.
The fact was, we argued amongst ourselves. And this group wanted to go this way, and it was ACS and WWII and another group. And we really needed collaboration. And
sure.
That's one thing that has always worried me over the years, that this group goes one way, this group goes another way, and we need to get the message right. Move on to today, when you look at it, we need to get the message to the government.
Sure.
And if you look at all the other governments around the world, all the countries that are uprising, we've seen a lot of activity from places like the Philippines, Taiwan, Korea, China. And China's coming back in again with a lot of software. Through the IDC days, I was very fortunate to take over as Asia Pacific Manager, Director. And we opened up in China, we opened up in Japan, and we had to then position the Australian and Asia Pacific market in the world market, and therefore I was off around the world talking to various executives of different companies and at IDC events and so forth, and it was a lot of work, and a lot of people didn't understand the Australian market. And I think we still have a similar problem today.
So let's go back to that period where this was first being set up with the Software Association. Who were the type of characters then? Who were they?
Type of characters are Well, in a lot of ways it was Peter Drainey,
Mm-hmm.
Peter Kazakos.
Later CAS Computing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those guys were, they were out there. They saw the need. They saw the need for training.
Yep.
Getting the right students through the schools and colleges.
Yep.
And they were on top of it.
Yep.
Whereas when you look at it today, we don't have a lot of people that are seen as being tracking and looking at education in schools and where we're going.
Sure. Yeah.
We had a good example last week of a company doing AI here.
All right. Yep.
And 2 days, and they were run by people from overseas.
Right.
Nothing from Australia, and attracting a lot of people. And the more you look at around, we've had many sessions like that.
Yes.
Today we have many events, and one has to pick the right event to be involved in.
Sure. Yeah.
To get the message across and to get the right speakers.
Yep.
To track what you're saying, we've started following on from Max Burnett's Computer Old Timers Lunch, COT. We've followed that through to get old timers to come and talk about days of when businesses were growing.
Yeah.
So we would get IBM, ICL, Honeywell, Burroughs, Control Data. All those types of companies would come along to listen what other competitors would see in the marketplace, but also would see as something we must be all aware of.
Yeah, sure.
What are your challenges? What are your challenges? What are your challenges? We tried to keep that going. It's very hard to keep that going to get the right speakers.
Yeah.
And we used to try that out, and you wouldn't get enough people along, so gradually it fell away.
Yeah. So continuing on with your career there, so you're at IDC, and how long were you there before you split off to your
20
next
years.
Right. And then after that it was Russ Report, or there was a period in between?
Yeah, it was. I did 20 years there, and I was asked then to move to Singapore to live.
Okay.
And my family was growing up, and it was the wrong time to go to Singapore for me. And so I stayed on for a while, and then they said, no, you'll have to go.
Yeah.
As they do. And I moved on, but IDC was brilliant from the point of view that, one thing I've always admired Winston Churchill, and he always said, you got to look back and you got to look forward. Yeah. And that was a good thing for me to remember. Yeah. The other one was my scout fellow, Baden Powell, who said you've got to be prepared. Yeah. So that's been my life all the way along. That I love mapping and tracking the industry, and that's what I did with IDC. Right. To find out how much market share IBM had, how much market share this company had. Yep. And you fell out with a lot of people because you got it wrong. Sure. Yeah. But you had to do it again and do it again and do it again. You couldn't just, it was going on around the world, but it wasn't going on in Australia. Right. Yeah. So I had to form a research team. I was very fortunate in the team that I put together in the 20 years. We opened up in New Zealand, we opened up in China. Right. In China we had a wonderful couple up there that she was a professor at the university and he was in the computer industry and a writer. Okay. And we met with Chairman Mao, we did all sorts of things. It was through having relations like that that you met the right people in each country. Yeah. And that was important to me. It was strange to me, but as a down south sort of traveller, but on the other side, we went into New Zealand. New Zealand was relatively easy to get on top of it, and it's going very well now. Right. NZ Tech in New Zealand is doing extremely a big job. Right. Ex-IDC guy. Yeah. And the more you look at that sort of thing, that's what we need in Australia. Sure. Yeah. We now, as part of what we're doing, is a follow-on from that research by mapping and tracking who is out there. But a lot of it is around, as you've said, characters and personalities.
Yeah.
And really it's remembering from the mainframe days to the PC days to the Unix days and all these other days, who were the leaders of those times.
Yeah.
And being able to keep in touch with them in some form or other. That's what I did with the Russ Report.
Right, yeah.
So with the Russ...
So I was going to ask you, how did the idea of the Russ Report come along?
IDG,
yeah.
Again, through people like Alan Power and John Costello, we got together with all the other journalists, and the media was going through a change at that point. And I thought, well, we could write the Russ Report, do it on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
I'm not a writer, but I employed Peter Scott.
Right.
Peter Scott knew the industry inside out. We went on to develop interviews, and I interviewed hundreds of chief executives about their views of the market, where they were going, what they were doing. Not everyone was prepared to tell me, but in a lot of cases it was a good way of getting their spirit and their names out there.
Yeah.
And the more we did of that, and the more conferences we ran as guest speakers and on the panel of different events, the more it went on. But then we were getting more and more events happening from different people.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, you look at it and you say, who are those speakers?
Right.
Where have they come from?
Yeah.
We need top level speakers that people identify with and that we can keep waving the flag with.
Yeah.
So that went on for 20 years. And it was a good time working still with IDG, although I wasn't working as much with IDC. But we then got into a position where we were a source of information.
Yeah.
So people were looking for partners in Australia. The partner program was shoddy in a lot of ways.
Right.
People were looking for local companies that they could merge or work with.
Yeah.
There was a lot of problems in the industry because people had inherited a lot of systems of the past.
Right.
And that was expensive to look after them and to go to the next level.
Yeah.
And if you look at that today, a lot of the enterprises in Australia have got people looking at their computer systems, not the old type of companies that we had, professional services, but a lot of new companies that go in and eradicate whether this is right or that's right. Where are we going to go? How are we going to fit in with things like AI and database and analytics and all the new areas? So the changes that have taken place, a lot of companies still run on their old systems.
Yeah.
They've got to move forward. They've got to look at new technologies. They've got to look at new things, new events that are happening, new products, new services.
Yeah.
And AI has shaken up the market.
Sure. Yeah.
Love it or hate it, but the more, even if you look at the newswire that came in this morning, there's loads and loads of stories about AI and where AI is going to go. And I've done a lot of interviews recently with the medical side, with the travel industry, the education industry. All of these people are saying we've got to get in on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
And that's a big challenge for us all.
No, that very much is. Yeah. So let's go back to your involvement with ACS. How did that come about?
It came about really through the Terrigal conferences.
Right.
Working with a lot of characters of the time. Harry Douglas was one at Daytech.
Yeah.
There were people like that saw the need to get that group together.
Yeah.
At Terrigal.
So just to pause on that. So what were the Terrigal conferences?
Well, there were conferences really with many speakers.
Right.
From, particularly in those days, Michael Hart from the Commonwealth Bank.
Yep.
And there was all sorts of people like him around.
Right.
Not everybody liked them, but
sure.
did have a lot of views and a lot of opinions that we wanted to hear about what had he done and what was happening at the Commonwealth Bank, or the guy from Bank of New South Wales, what was happening there.
Sure.
Guy from BHP, Cyril Brooks.
Right.
Brooksy was very, very supportive of ACS.
Right.
And he was involved in a lot of discussion groups. Sadly passed away.
Yeah.
And sadly a lot of them have passed away now.
Yeah.
And the more you look at that, you look at Trevor Housley, it's a good example of what he was doing with communications, and people wanted to listen to him as an expert in that particular sector. So there was the PC guys, the mainframe guys, you know, right across the board.
Yeah.
And then we got down to the internet. You had the internet people that sort of appeared on the surface. Now a lot of them were on our radar, but they were from overseas.
Yeah.
So we wanted the local people to get involved and to be able to relay the views and comments and experiences that they'd had.
Yeah.
And that's really what we were doing with the ACS in those early days.
Who from the ACS was going along to these?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
No, that's all right.
Sorry, but
yeah, no, that's
I
okay.
could tell you, but
no, that's quite all right. So, having been to the Terrigal conferences, been introduced to ACS, how did you continue the relationship with ACS?
I've presented at many conferences.
Yep.
Many events down at Circular Quay.
Right.
I probably did 1 or 2 a year.
Yeah.
And it was very good because, again, it was the collection of people that were all open, and you had good discussions, and you pulled everybody in to the subject matter.
Yeah.
And by having, you know, Michael Hart was one guy that always impressed me. If you look at the money he made,
sure,
where he went off overseas.
Yeah, that's right.
What
Barclays Bank, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And you know, he's very outspoken.
Yes.
A lot of people would say we did have a lot of outspoken people we didn't always agree with.
Yeah.
And that was a problem. And one of the problems we had as a research group was in sharing information that we had gathered in Australia about this sector or that sector or this company or whatever. We had to be very careful about it.
Right. Why so?
Well, because if you got it wrong, you'd have a whole lot of things thrown at you.
Right. Yeah.
And so from that point of view, we had to double research. We had to repeat the research, go back every year to do it, and then move on to the next one. Yeah. And that was very hard when I first started that. The other guy that is a hero of mine and a man I respect is Pat McGovern from IDG.
Right. Yeah.
Pat was very adventurous, and you know, if one reads his stories in his book and how he was in with these companies like IBM and Unisys and so forth at the very early days.
Right. So Pat, so I'm not familiar with Pat. Australian or
no, American.
Right. Yeah.
He was the formation of IDC and IDG.
Right. Okay.
Computer World, CRN, and all that.
Okay. Right.
Right around the world.
Yep.
And he contributed $100 million to MIT.
Right.
The year he died.
Yeah.
And that is for brain surgery. Brain.
Yeah.
Inspections. But Pat, I mean, I enjoyed travelling with him. He was outspoken.
Sure.
And he was respected by different audiences. And I learned a lot from him. I remember the first time he came to Australia, we were at the Menzies, and Amdahl and IBM and all these people were there. And they were asking questions of me, but Pat was answering them.
Sure.
Because that was early stages. That was really within my first few months of IDC.
Yeah.
We hadn't done that research.
Right.
And it became more and more apparent that we needed to know where this market was going, who the key players were, who the key leaders were, and right across the whole sector.
Yep.
And it was challenging times, but a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. But we had to build up the team in Australia.
Yep.
From when I started, we had 3 people. We ended up with 20 eventually.
Yeah.
But some great guys came through IDC and moved on to other areas. One of the things we keep getting asked today is about who are the analysts in Australia that are mapping and tracking the industry.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are working globally now.
Sure.
They're not just covering the local market. It's the same, as you well know, with the media in Australia. That is a different game. A lot of the press releases that we get are press releases from the office in Singapore or the office back in America.
Yeah.
And we need local stories about successes, who's signed this, who's signed that, what is going on, and how should we monitor that and gather that information. That's what we did at IDC.
Right.
We had the Rust radar, we had the interviews with the various people, and once that got going, there was an enthusiasm to get their name in there. We had 50,000 readers.
Yeah, that's right.
And it really went extremely well. But we got to a stage that I needed a top editor.
Right.
So Peter Scott was there for a long while. David Varga was there for a long time.
Yeah.
And then David Varga wanted to travel around the world. And I thought, I think I've had enough.
Yeah. And publishing got harder and harder in that period too.
Publishing got a lot harder. It certainly did. But it was a different environment.
Sure.
We started off owned by IDG, IDC, Computer World.
Right.
With John Kennedy.
Yep.
Not John Kennedy, anyway, John Kennedy. And Kennedy was very supportive, and a lot of the IDC, IDG people were very supportive in stories and what you should be looking at here or there or tracking or whatever.
Yep.
And we went to many, many different areas, and in the end, it wasn't doing any extra business for IDG.
Yeah.
So he sold it to me for $1.
Right. Yeah.
And that's when I then thought, my gosh, we've got a lot of work to do. But we had been working on, with IDC, we had the green sheet, and we were doing that for 20 odd years.
Yep.
Then moved into this for 20 odd years. And I still have many stories that we wrote or we put up, and I think, oh gosh, did we talk about that? That was a good topic, and interviewed so and so, and they responded.
Yeah.
Clearly, Brian Finn at IBM.
Yes.
Was a classic. I first of all met him while he was with IBM in India, setting up the Indian operation, and then he flew to Australia. I met him the day after. Interviewed him over at St Leonard's, and Brian to me was always very open. He had a lot of good comments and a lot of respect, and that was the same with Max Burnett, with all those top speakers of the time. And Vamos was the same. You know, Vamos always wanted to talk to the media.
Yeah, Steve Vamos. Yeah.
And the more you look at that today, there's very few PR companies, very few, as we talked before, about the media journalists who are the top ones that we listen to or we see or we watch. And a lot of those things have sort of changed over the years.
Yeah. It's interesting what you raised there, Len, that there's a lot of talk at the moment about sovereign capability in areas like AI and data centres and so on. And yet the government, yesterday at the time of interviewing this, announced a multi-billion-dollar deal with AWS in America to boost sovereign capability. But what you're describing is a period like with Brian Finn with IBM. he was the one that set up the Wangaratta manufacturing facility for IBM. So in that period, in that 1980s, 1990s period, you had the multinational corporations, primarily American, but some European and Japanese, that were prepared to invest in developing Australian capabilities too. Strikes me we don't have that now. That the AWSs and the Microsofts, they'll make nice noises, but they're not really investing much in Australia.
No. Well, you raise that point with them. They say we are. But you say, well, it's not like Wangaratta. It's not like all those things that we saw where there was a joint possibility of us working together. And you can go back through history and look at all the things that have originated out of Australia. And, you know, the Piercy Foundation has highlighted loads of those, and they've all gone. And then, therefore, you say we need ways where within the government there are people that understand the benefits of technology and how it's important as part of our ecosystem. Wherever we're going to go, or where we're going to go in the future. If you take it now with quantum and all security and all these health, it's all going worldwide. And we're going to have to get in on that bandwagon. We've got some great health facilities in Australia. We need to be able to share that worldwide, but also as part of our economy. And that's another side of the story when you look at how companies like Kazakos and these guys all grew, and you look at Tech One. Sorry about this. Great examples of how things can move around the world. And Tech One's doing phenomenal in the UK with local government. So we have to find our niche in the market and areas that we're good at, that we can say, let's highlight that as part of an Australian economy and a part of Australia's future. And therefore we've got to be banging on the doors all the time, letting people know in Canberra and state by state as to what is going on technically wise, that we, Australia, are excelling at, or what are we doing well. And if you look at quantum computing, or you look at climate change, you look at all these things, they're going to be big issues of the future. And, you know, I look at Indonesia, I look at the Philippines, I look at these other countries that are jumping on that bandwagon very quickly. And the more you look at that, the more you think Australian companies are not going to stay Australian. They're going to move offshore. And that's a concern.
How do you think we could address that?
Well, we could address it by certainly highlighting where we're good and what things we're exceeding the world on in that respect. We've also got to think about, we've got to have the right training in Australia. As that event last week where all the speakers were from India. We need to have speakers from Australia. And we need to have events that are promoting Australian companies. People used to do that a lot, but it's all fallen away now. And Rachel Slattery was a good example of that.
Indeed.
And she used to run those events with the ACS and with other people, where we would get all these groups together.
That's right.
And, you know, there was an outcome. And that was something we saw as being very important, the way of getting our message out there.
So we get a lot of talk at the moment from the governments about how they're supporting the sector. What do you think they could do better?
Well, we need a minister.
Well, we do have a newly appointed minister in Tim Ayres, and we've got the Science and Innovation Assistant Minister in Andrew Charlton, so just in the new federal government. What would be your advice to them if you got the opportunity to sit with them?
Well, I think they'd have to... One thing I did back in AWII days,
right,
I pulled together 15 industry leaders and we presented at Parliament House.
Right.
And it was very interesting. The ministers arrived and we highlighted all the issues from all these different people.
Yeah.
And that's the thing we have to do as part of a collective group.
Yeah.
AWII, I used to do it and used to be very active around the world.
Right.
With different people. But you look at it today, we're not. And if you take the associations in Australia that we've had over a period of time, it's been enormous.
Yeah.
And we've got to say, why have they disappeared? Why haven't they worked together? And for a small country like Australia, that's too many associations.
Sure.
And we need collaboration. We need to be able to work together in some form or other. That isn't easy to do, but it has to be done consistently.
Sure.
And we have to make sure that we have the right people involved and those people see the benefits of Australia and where it's going. A lot of the work we used to see in Australia is now out of Singapore.
Right.
And that is concern because you'd say, who's the expert in this area? Oh, he's out of Singapore. And you think, why don't we have those people in Australia?
Yeah.
You know, and we've been talking to a company recently that all their activity, their marketing, PR, everything is out of Singapore. Nothing out of Australia anymore.
Right. Yeah, and that seems to be the pattern there, that it's just the sales function that's in Australia, if that.
Yeah. Well, we're an interesting market when you look at agriculture. It's a very important market for Australia and around the world.
Yep.
Very much so. And ag tech is important.
Yep.
If you look at, you could even say the wine industry.
Sure.
As important around the world, and it's in the promotion activities of that. But the more you look at health, health is very important.
Yeah.
Pulling together all the different health systems, all the different medical products that are now available.
Yep.
And we had a talk with a guy last week who is out of Brisbane, and he goes to a dentist who has got the latest gear for dentistry.
Yep.
Technology, scanning devices, everything else.
Sure.
Not out of Brisbane though, he's out of Townsville.
Excellent. Yeah.
And there's that sort of situation. So why isn't that through our network?
Yeah.
And our networks are important to have high-speed networks.
Yep.
And a lot of countries are now looking at electricity in Australia, whether we should get electricity out of the Philippines or wherever.
Yeah.
And so there's a different thing that pops up all the time. But coming back on your point, that's where we need the experts in Canberra and then state level that recognise where quantum, where health, where agriculture and all these things are going, where we need to be on top of things. Education is a critical one.
Yeah, sure.
And therefore, you know, when you look at ACS, that's an area that they're active in.
Yeah.
But are they on top of things?
That's a good question. So we're coming to the end of this. Who would you say have been the big influences in your career in technology in Australia?
I was I was always a follower of local companies. I was fortunate that I grew up through the mainframe area. So it was people like Brian Finn and Paul Travers and those people that, Paul Brandling, that are, you know, sadly have passed on, but were very much the flag wavers. If you then went to the next stage of the mini computer stage with Hewlett Packard, Data General, Digital, and all those, Max Burnett, Wayne Fitzsimmons, those guys were all good leaders.
Yep.
But all of them were transferred overseas.
Right. Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
In a lot of times, and then you move on to the software industry, and we were well supported by the major software companies.
Yeah.
You know, Oracle was particularly strong here, and people like that.
Yes.
And Larry used to come out quite a lot.
He did. Yeah.
But if the more you look at people, Larry's still around. And Larry sees the opportunities in healthcare.
Yeah.
That's what we need, more people like Larry.
Yeah.
And people that can come out to Australia on a regular basis and visit us. You know, we interviewed Bill Gates while he was here. We interviewed all of those people.
Yeah.
We always remember Bill Gates at the Opera House. And the more you look at those people, they were very keen on where Australia was going.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, Bill Gates, in these 2001 appearances, he had some strong words on Australia's future.
He
which
did.
Probably 25 years later are as pertinent today as they were then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they're the things that we've got to look at and we've got to follow.
Yeah.
And the more I look at, as you said, characters and personalities, there's loads of them. I think we have 100 American companies in Australia now.
Yeah.
100. I mean, that's enormous.
Sure.
And they're all looking for the right country managers. They're all looking for the right people that understand this sector and that sector, where it's going.
Yep.
We have a lot of Asian companies coming to Australia. A lot of people there looking at opportunities.
Yep.
So highlighting the characters and the personalities is a major task, and we need the venue to do that. That's something associations should be doing.
Yeah, no, that's a good challenge for ACS there. So just to finish up, Len, what would be your advice to a young person looking at getting into the industry today?
It's very interesting when you look at young people and you look at what's being taught at schools. And AI is changing a lot of that.
Yes.
I mean, the kids at school, you know, I've had them looking at my character and background on AI.
Yep.
And this is a 10-year-old.
Oh, right, yes.
And you think about it and you think, what's he going to be doing at school over the next period of 10 years?
Yeah.
What languages are we going to be teaching?
Yeah.
Where are we going to be going? What areas are we going to be up to?
Yeah.
And, you know, we've got to have that. We've got to create that as a position. The thing we've got to have is people have got to understand businesses.
Yeah.
And businesses is where they're going.
Yeah.
You know, we've had problems with banks, telcos, all sorts of people. A lot of that is security issues.
Sure.
So security is a big thing
that
we've got to be right on top of. And being protective of all of our information, data and whatever we do in that sector.
Yeah, so cyber being one of those big areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Len, on that encouraging note, I'd like to thank you very much for being part of the program.
Well, there was a lot more we could cover, but
I'm sure we can revisit this down the track, and I look forward to doing it.
Yeah.